In this video, I will show you the basic editing features in Nitro for iPhone. You enter Edit by tapping the button in the upper right. Tap the I button in the left to get shot information, including shutter speed, ISO, and camera. Next is the histogram. You can display a floating histogram by tapping the button in the middle bar. You can also drag the histogram around. Histograms visually describe the distribution of color or tone in an image. The left side of the histogram represents darker pixels, and the right side of the histogram represents brighter pixels. The height of the histogram at each point tells you how much the image contains that value. In this image, even though it's pretty bright, you can see that most of the pixels are not at the right edge, so they're not actually white. And there's relatively little on the left side where dark pixels would be represented, which matches what we see in the image itself. In addition, the histogram has different display options. For example, you can set it to only show when you're actually adjusting with a slider, or you can show it only when you're not adjusting the image. That can be handy so the histogram isn't covering the image when you're making edits, but it's still visible as a reference. The main tools are on the bottom. The first is quick fixes, like Auto Enhance and Clone. Others will appear depending on the image you have. The next is presets and LUTs, followed by masks. Masking will be a separate video. After that are the slider tools. Those are the focus of this video. The adjustments are listed in a common workflow order. For example, many people crop early in the process to make sure they are only concerning themselves with the part of the image they're interested in. However, other people like to crop at the end, or perhaps they apply white balance correction first. Nitro lets you reorder the adjustments in the UI. Pick adjustment order from the button on the right edge. You can drag adjustments up and down. You can also set the auto collapse setting. If it's on, adjustments will open and close automatically to save space. That's only relevant on iPhone when you rotate the iPhone to a horizontal position and the panel is actually displayed on the right side of the screen. Reordering adjustments only changes the appearance in the UI. It does not change the order that the adjustments are processed to make an image. Let's start with crop. For most adjustments, you do not need to click the checkbox before working. It will turn itself on. Just start dragging sliders or otherwise working with the image. The controls below the crop checkbox are tools. The crop tool, straighten, rotate, and flip. When you make a change to an adjustment, the checkbox automatically enables and the reset button appears. I can tap the checkbox to turn the adjustment on and off. I can also clear the adjustment by tapping the reset arrow. The crop tool is mostly self-explanatory. However, I should point out the control that appears when you turn it on. The number sign controls a rule of thirds grid, and next to that is the size of the cropped image in megapixels. Next up is white balance. The white balance indicates the color temperature of the image, and you can adjust that if the image has a tint that you want to neutralize. There are also presets for common scenes, like daylight or fluorescent. One way to adjust white balance is with the auto white balance control. It looks for an area that it thinks should be gray, but isn't, and adjusts the value to make it gray. If you use the eyedropper, you want to work the same way as auto white balance. Look for a part of the image that should be gray, but is not. Stick with midtones because that allows the white balance code the most latitude in making a correction. I can also drag while sampling, and the white balance will update in real time. The tone adjustment is an important one for controlling brightness in the image. The first slider is Boost. Boost is a very important slider when recovering highlights, and you won't find it in apps from other companies. It controls a key part of Apple's raw decoder. That could almost use a whole video. And in my other app, Raw Power, you had to know how to use it to get the best results. However, in Nitro, just use the Recover Highlights quick fix. That will move the boost slider and other important sliders for you. So let's jump over to the quick fix section to do that. Now you see Recover Highlights appears. You will only see this item in quick fixes for raw images, except for Pro RAW images. Pro RAW images have already been balanced, so you really cannot recover highlights for those types of images. Before we get started, Let me tell you about the clipping indicators, which are the circles at the top of the histogram. Clipping indicators are used to identify very bright and very dark parts of images. If an image has very bright pixels, the circles will light up, as you can see here. If you tap on the circles, you will get an overlay that shows which pixels are very bright or very dark. Another word for very bright pixels is clipped, because the pixel value is too large to be represented on screen and therefore is clipped to the maximum value of white. In other words, the pixel is brighter than the brightest value that can be shown on screen. The first circle is the one you will use most often. It shows you any pixels that are clipped or are black. A pixel is considered clipped if any of the components, red, green, or blue, are above 1.0, which is the highest value that can normally be seen on screen. Another word for a clipped pixel is a hot pixel, and a black pixel is sometimes called a cold pixel. As a result, these are sometimes called hot and cold pixel overlays. If I tap on the white circle, you will see red for pixels that are too bright and blue for pixels that are black. There are some dark pixels at the bottom of the image you'll see in blue. The other circles indicate hot pixels, but only per channel. So it'll show you if pixels are clipped in red, green, or blue. To recover highlights, just drag the first slider. You can see how the clipping overlay changes quickly as the highlights are recovered and there's more detail coming back in the sky. You can also see the histogram pulling back from the right edge as more detail is being recovered in the image. You can take this all the way until all of the red overlay is gone, but I actually like to keep a little bit of it because I want to have some pixels that are actually white. You can then bring up the midtones to brighten up the image a little bit as well. Editing in Nitro is undoable and non-destructive. In the middle bar, you'll see a few important buttons. The first one is Undo and Redo. The button next to it that's currently disabled with the two overlapping rectangles will show the image before and after edits, also called Show Original. It also appears in the Recover Highlights interface. Press and hold. Turn off the clipping overlay to see the before and after a little bit better. You can easily see how much detail we recovered in the clouds. Press Done to leave Recover Highlights. Before I move on to tone, let me use this image to show the straighten tool in crop. Simply drag a line that you want to be straight, for example on the water. Then tap the check mark, and the image is straightened. Tone has a large number of sliders. I mentioned boost already, and if you look at the sliders, Recover Highlights moved quite a few of them. It moved boost, it also moved highlights, midtones, and recovery, and whites. Exposure is a slider for adjusting the whole image's brightness. Highlights just works on the brighter pixels, shadows works on the darker areas, and midtones is right in the center. Blacks, whites, and boost shadows are only present for raw images because they control special settings in Apple's decoder. Blacks in particular are especially useful when dealing with extremely underexposed areas, but that's at best explained in a separate video. I want to stick to the basics here. Recovery is another tool for working with overexposed areas of an image because it's tuned to just change the brightest parts of an image. By the way, in addition to dragging sliders, you can also tap on a number, which will bring up a numeric keypad. Enhance is next up. It has some basic tools like contrast, saturation, and vibrancy. Vibrancy is like saturation, but it doesn't affect skin tones or orange hues. You can see the difference between saturation and vibrancy with this image. Saturation really affects the orange in this image, but vibrancy doesn't have nearly the same effect. Deepen and lighten are like smart versions of highlights and shadows. They work on the brighter or darker parts of an image respectively, but do it in a way that adds richness to the image. Detail has two basic types of sliders, sharpening and noise reduction. Clarity and sharpen are two types of sharpening sliders. It's best to look at detail sliders when zoomed in. The easiest way is to pinch to zoom or double tap to zoom to 100%. You can see the effect of clarity and sharpen on the carving of the pumpkin. By the way, for more precision, you can also drag down on a slider and it'll turn green. When you do that, you get more precision as you drag back and forth. And this is the sharpen slider. If I drag to the left, it'll actually blur the image. The noise reduction sliders can be used to increase or decrease the default amount of noise reduction applied to the image. Look at the right edge of the pumpkin. Luminoise controls black and white noise, while color noise controls noise that gives the image a colored speckle look. So as I decrease luminoise, you'll see black speckles appear. I can increase it past the default to remove even more luminance noise. The same goes for the color noise slider. You can really see the color noise if I move the slider to the left and to the right to remove even more than the default. Noise reduction can also remove detail from the image, so you can counteract that somewhat with the noise detail slider. Last is perspective. When shooting at an angle, you can get an odd, well, perspective. To fix it, you can move the vertical or horizontal sliders. Perspective automatically crops the image. You can decrease that crop by moving the zoom slider. But if you move it too far, you'll get black pixels. You can use crop to remove them. That's a tour of basic editing in Nitro. There'll be more videos covering the other adjustments in the app.